Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I want to talk about a piece of C# advice that I actually agree with in general that was found on LinkedIn, which is weird because everyone knows LinkedIn is terrible for advice, but actually it makes sense. But the feedback to that recommendation is really interesting to me and I want to talk about it. And that is whether you should be sealing your classes or records or not by default. Let's take a look at the advice itself. So it's like I'm often asked whatever, blah, 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 ChatGPT writing stuff. The idea is, should you be sealing your classes by default or not? And the point made here is that you should seal it by default unless inheritance is explicitly required. And therefore, the class is sealed. The JIT compiler can apply optimizations, which will slightly improve performance. Both of these cases, I agree with. Yes, there will be actually a performance boost in some cases if you seal your classes. And that's because the JIT won't have to worry about where this code can go if the class is meant to be inherited. So it can actually optimize it. But the case that this will actually improve performance is true. Now it's on the nanosecond level, so you're not really going to see that performance ever, but technically he's not wrong. So where do I stand with this right off the get-go? Well, in general, I do agree with this piece of advice. You should be sealing your classes or records by default instead of having them open, not because of performance, but purely because of intent. And this is actually way more important if you're doing library development than if you're working in a team, because nobody will be like, oh, I accidentally inherited the class. But if a library author says that this class is explicitly sealed, it means that you're not meant to, extend it, because that part of the state of the library is part of the contract between you and the user. So whenever you say that something is just by default open and you don't seal it, then you can't go ahead and seal it ahead of time because you might say, oh, this should actually have been sealed. So it's a bit of a complicated one. It's extremely niche as well, but technically, in my opinion, especially for libraries, you should be sealing everything. John Skid has talked about how this is the default approach, how it should have been done forever. And that's what we see with languages like Kotlin, for example, where you have a class here and then you try to extend that class as a cat over here. And if I run this code, it won't actually work. Even if I said create the cat correctly, it's going to say the type is final, so it cannot be extended. You have to explicitly say open class for that to work. In fact, it's not this one. It is this one, open class annual, then you can go ahead and the code will run. So it is in general a more modern, better design choice. Again, it's up to preference anyway. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you should not be doing that, but in my opinion, that's how things should be. Now let's take a look at the comments. Help me, I accidentally inherited my class. Well, I can't really help you with that, but what I can help you is with becoming a better C# developer, because our Black Friday 2025 sale is now live on Dome-Train. 103 courses, more than 30 authors, tons of hours of content. Use code Black Friday 25 at checkout to get 40% off anything, and if you get Dome-Train Pro, you get the discount forever. So this one says it's a preference, not using seal by default is more common in my experience, but both options are valid. Some members of C# original design team and John Skid considered default unsealed one of C# mistakes. Yes, I agree with that. It just shows intent that you want it to be extended. Now, in a language that was designed after Java, Java has the same thing. They have the final keyword to basically seal it. So because it was modeled after Java in the beginning, I can understand why at the time it made more sense, because it was a more heavy object-oriented programming language. Now it's way more functional than it was. So if it was to be redesigned, I think it would be sealed by default, but I could be wrong on this one. I never had problems with classes being unsealed, but I had problems with libraries where developers thought they knew what they were doing and sealed the class. Well, they probably did know what they were doing. Like, you were trying to do something the library author didn't want you to do. The sealed keyword is a keyword you use if you know what you're doing. It's not really one you'd use if you don't know what you're doing, because it's just so niche. It's like stack-alloc. You won't see stack-alloc used by someone who doesn't know what stack-alloc does in general. I'm sure there's cases, but you get my point. This one is really nice. Generally, I use the most restrictive keywords, sealed, read-only, private, and later, if needed, I reevaluate if they should be removed. Now, this makes, again, way more sense in library stuff, and this is why the internal keyword, in my opinion, is not used enough. alongside private and all the other ones. But yeah, I also use sealed for library classes mostly, so as to indicate which classes can be extended and which cannot. By the way, is unsealing a breaking change? It is not a breaking change. Sealing is a breaking change. Unsealing wouldn't be a breaking change. Now, I agree with this comment the most actually. Is I always seal classes and make them internal or private unless they need to be public. That's how I am as well. What I really don't like is when we don't define actually an access modifier at all. Yes, I know what the default access is for every type, but in general, it's nice to say, even if it's a class and you want to be internal, you say it's internal or private or whatever it is. This one is I seal everything unless it's abstract. You get the idea. It's like saying that you would go into a class and you would make every method virtual and a non-abstract class, every method virtual, because you just want everyone to just inherit everything if they inherit the class. It just doesn't quite make sense, and it's probably because we've used the language in its current state for so long. Our brain chemistry has adapted to think that that's how things should be and we shouldn't question it. But in reality, we should. But I really want to know from you. What do you think about this? And where do you stand? Sealed, not sealed? Leave a comment down below, let me know. Well, that's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, keep coding.